And here we go.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. This is episode number 271. And today we have a very special guest joining the show from down under. His name is Gavan McMahon, and he is the author of an article which recently appeared in volume 15 of Garrison, the journal. We'll put a link in the description down below where you can find it. And he did an article entitled Tippit, A Conspiracy and Cover-Up, the Story of Lee Harvey Oswald and Dallas police officer JD Tippit. Welcome to the show. Gavan, how are you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're very pleased to have you and very interested in what you have to tell us, because I know for me personally, there's certain aspects of the Kennedy assassination that I don't look into as probably as much as I should. And one is probably the medical evidence, and the other one is probably the Tippit murder. There's just so much there to take in, so many witnesses, so much testimony, so many unanswered questions, so much confusion, so much, this way and that way. And it's all very confusing. And I know, some people have tried to do it and have done it very well. Read some great books about it. And it seems like you've stumbled across some startlingly new revelations and information when it pertains to the Tippit murder involving Helen Markham and her family. But before we get into things, Gavan, just let the listeners know a little bit about yourself and how you kind of became interested in the Kennedy assassination, being from Australia.
Yeah, look, I've been interested in it for quite a long time. In fact, some of the other members of the family have been as well. So we've read a lot of material early on. And of course, in recent times, I was able to retire fairly early from work, which was good. I'm a retired law enforcement. I'm with Customs and Border Protection, or was with Customs and Border Protection here in Australia. So since retirement, I've been able to get a lot closer to have a look at a lot more of the information. I think, as you pointed out there's been a lot of confusion, and I find that very odd. I don't think that's an accident. That's been made that way. As far as myself, I've done 4 trips to the States, holiday, of course, with my wife, several occasions. And then I've actually been over there specifically to Dallas conference time. Went to 2 different conferences, JFK and Judith Baker. The conferences, how would I describe those? Underwhelming. There's some good contacts you make, but I think they've had their day. They would be much better off having a forum for a lot of question and answer, I think. But that is what it is. It was when I did the trips over there, I got to know people on the Knoll a little bit. And that includes Mike Brownlow, Bill Pulte, some others connected with those guys. Those 2 guys have passed away, by the way, you're probably aware. And they've got some YouTubes out there, 2 completely different personalities. Mike, of course, pretty well known African-American, that sort of like was pretty out there. He didn't make a lot of notes, or he had a lot of notes, but he actually, I think, let himself down, that he didn't present some of that in a more cohesive manner. But his information was very good. Bill Pulte was a emeritus professor at SMU, so you've got chalk and cheese there. But they got to know their stuff. The interesting thing what attracted me to that was that Mike had big contacts with Bobby Hargis and got to know a lot of the cops there. And I thought, that's where you're going to find out what's going on. So my view on the whole thing, of course, is very straightforward. I'm in a bit of an odd camp. Oswald was a patsy, absolutely no 2 ways about it. When you mention the medical evidence, that's the key, I think, that really tells you this was covered up and that they had to, because it was going to take you more than a patsy to do what happened. Oswald a patsy, and that's where I'm a bit different when we get to the Tippit side of things, because I think some years ago I wasn't really sure. I just assumed, well, he didn't do that, And it was after really being exposed to some of the information, but also talking to those guys and others. And then I started to realize that, if you look at things in simple terms, if you've got a patsy, and I believe that he was, you're going to have to do something with the patsy. You're either going to let him escape on a plane and live happily ever after in Rio de Janeiro or somewhere, or you're going to arrest him and put him on trial and send him to prison as a patsy, or you're going to take him out. Yep. So there's not many other options. Now, I think a lot of people seem to have got away from the fact that if there was a patsy, I can guarantee you they did not take their eyes off Oswald from the minute it all went down to the minute in the theatre when they actually grabbed hold of him. So they're not going to have him just suddenly disappear. How do you have a plan with a patsy if he disappears? So that's the sort of intrigue that got me interested, and that led me then to looking at some articles, various forums that are out there, some absolute rubbish on Facebook forums groups. But there is some information you still can glean through that. And what that led me to was reading some articles, which I thought, well, these are disinformation. There's no way in the world. And that then led me to make some contact with some people. And my initial contact was made with a fellow by the name of Vlad Helen. And that he's the son of Mrs. Doris Helen, who was living in the area and made some observations about a second police car. So that's where it really kicked in for me. I started saying, okay, what's going on there? And of course, Mike Brownlow and Pulte had also come to the same conclusion from people they'd spoken to, that the second police car was there. So that led to more contacts and different other people that I spoke to. And then ultimately led me to the contact with the Markham family. Now, as I put in the article, the Markham family for 60 years has been very quiet about everything. And as you read the article, it sort of explains why they've had to be quiet, because they were shut down. The people in the family, just a little bit of background there. Helen Markham had 5 children. There's 2 girls and 3 boys. You've literally had those 5 people have all passed. They were all had partners or whatever. James Markham was the second youngest, and William was the youngest. Now, the lady that I spoke to, Laverne, was William's husband for 48 years. He only passed about, I think, 5 years ago. James Markham, which we'll get into a little bit, he died in prison. So he was actually sent to prison, and I think he died in prison there in Texas. They're the 2 that were associated with this gang that we'll talk about in a little bit. But did you want me to just explain what the crux of the Markham information from the family was?
Yeah. Real quick, I got a question. Did you say Laverne is a male?
Female.
Oh, female. Okay. I misunderstood.
The daughter-in-law of Helen Markham, correct, sir?
Was married to William.
Correct. She's married to William, so she's Helen Markham's daughter-in-law. She knew Helen for 30 years. Yeah.
Before we do, just real quick, kind of nutshell the official Helen Markham story that everybody's heard for 60 years before we get into the new information. You know what I mean? For those who might not be familiar with who Helen Markham is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can give you that. So what we've got, the official story is that Oswald was walking down the street from the east. Tippit comes from behind him in a car, pulls over, goes to, has some conversation with Oswald through the window of the car. And then the policeman, Officer Tippit, gets out of the car, goes around the front and then around to the front, and then is shot by Tippit. So what you have there is numerous people who then were presented by the police as witnesses. And the star witness was Helen Markham, who was supposedly standing catty corner to this incident. That's a term I've got used to now, an American term. We don't use that over here. But anyway, she was standing there and saw all this unfold in front of her. There were some other witnesses that were there. She then observed Oswald, or a man, leave the area, run down Patton, and then she talked to the police, was taken down to the police station, and then did a line-up a couple of hours later and identified Oswald. So that's it very broadly. There's a brief interaction between Tippit and Oswald through the car window. Then Tippit gets out, and Oswald shoots him, and then Oswald leaves. There's other
So from where
witnesses
she was standing
around
on the corner there, right? She's waiting for a bus to go to work. And when you say that Tippit and Oswald are traveling in a westerly direction from the east, they're both going in the same direction, and Oswald, I guess, is in front of Tippit. Tippit comes up from behind him and pulls over.
Correct. That's what they're saying officially. But they're coming from the west. They're coming from the right hand, from the Texas Theatre side, going towards the east, towards Marsalis, up 10th. So supposedly Tippit comes from behind Oswald and pulls him over just past the corner of 10th and Patton. When you say Helen Markham was going to catch a bus, the bus was down at Jefferson. So she lives on 9th Street, which is 10th Street, obviously 9th Street, just back up from there, probably 100 metres, I think. So she'd only walked a short distance to get to the corner of 10th and Patton. The supposed story is that she would continue to walk across Patton, across 10th Street, down to Jefferson, another 100 metres or so. And that's where her bus was at about, 1:12. But as we'll get to in a minute, that's the official story, but that's incorrect.
Yes. Thank you for that.
So you want me to just give you a bit of an understanding of what the family was able to reveal, Laverne in particular?
Yes, absolutely. I'm dying to hear this.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Laverne, she's in her 60s, late 60s. She's a retired teacher. So we got to talk to her. I got to talk to her, talked with other members of the family. We were attempting to do some recording, and that may still occur. A couple of attempts we've had didn't quite work out. Our communication was phone, email, and messaging over quite a period of time. That's from 2022 when I first started on this, and it went for probably a good 12 months or more by the time I'd started to prepare some writing. Obviously, you're building up rapport and trust with people, and that helps the whole process. I want to thank them for speaking up. That's their view, that they've been quiet for quite a long time, but there's another story going on here. So the story that the claims and the revelations that I've presented based on the information that they've provided is that it was a setup. It was a planned, what we'd call a clandestine secret operation to arrest Oswald at that point. And there's three components that they provide information on that support that statement. The first is that Helen Markham is a prepared, planted, paid witness. She was to be there to watch the arrest of Oswald, not just to watch the arrest of somebody, it was the arrest of Oswald. We'll get into this in a little bit, and this is where it was quite amazing. She knew Oswald. I'll get into a little bit about how there's a gang there, which involved her son, James and William, a street gang in Oak Cliff. So we've got Helen there as a planted paid witness. The obvious thing I put in the next question with that is, well, if she's there as a paid planted witness, who else? The arrest that was being referred to that she was to witness related to the fact that the two Markham boys, William and James, had taken Oswald on a break and enter of a house. The gang, that's what they did around Oak Cliff. They're all youngish guys. They're around the 18, 19, 20. At this point in time, James Markham and William Markham had both spent time, more than 12 months, in prison for a range of different things. I think it was car-related theft, some forged counterfeiting checks or something. I forget the full details. So they're out on parole. So the arrest of Oswald was a set-up. So he wasn't forced to go to the break and enter. He went along with that, according to the Markham people. But that was to set him up for a break and enter and theft charge for an arrest. The third, and this is probably just as important as Markham being a planted witness, was that there was a staged scene, an event that happened at the corner of 10th and Marsalis. So you're talking maybe, I forget, maybe 150 metres or something, or a bit more, east from where the interception with Tippit occurs. Now, if you go all the way back to Harrison Livingston's books, you'll see that there was reports of a disturbance in that area of Oak Cliff. And some people were certainly saying things like, if you want to get to the bottom of the whole Tippit and Oswald and all that at the Tippit scene, you need to explore and find out what happened about this event, disturbance, dispute, whatever it was. Now, I've put some information in the article that refers to some other research that Professor Pulte and Brownlow put in, but I won't get into that. That's their research. The Markham family were of the opinion that some of the other members of the gang may have been involved in that scene. The scene, as it has been explained, involved a stabbing. So there's some men and there's some sort of an incident, and this scene has occurred, a disturbance, and this is supposed to have occurred shortly after Oswald has been dropped off at the corner of 10th and Marsalis by car. In other words, he didn't walk, as per the official version from the Warren Commission. He was taken to that position and told to walk. Now, again, Brownlow and Pulte have done some work, and there were reports in, again, some of the research material from other writers about a certain Max Long who lived down that street, and that was possibly where Oswald was being told to walk to. So that's the three events that the family has explained, and interestingly enough, some of these events are mentioned by other researchers. So I think some of those other researchers had come across some stuff that was, but didn't get any more information, obviously, to fully explore it. So the three events are the stage scene. Markham was a planted witness to observe the arrest, and the arrest was in relation to Oswald's break and enter and theft in company of the two Markham boys.
I also heard too that, and I'm not sure if it was referring to the Markham boys or if there were some other hoodlums about there in that area, but the shooting of what's his name? Guy that worked at Johnny Reynolds' car lot, Warren Reynolds.
Yeah.
Who was shot in the head in like the basement when he was turning the lights off, and they thought it was Daryl Garner, but he ended up passing the lie detector test and everything else, and had witnesses where he was somewhere else. And I remember coming across something saying it might have been, they might have been talking about the Markham boys who were like notorious troublemakers, and they could have been trying to either rob him or who knows. I don't know. I've just heard that they could have possibly been involved in that as well.
Yeah, I don't know. The family didn't talk about that side. I was able to put a lot of after I got the initial information over a period of time. I was then trying to introduce names to see whether any of these names had come out, that they heard, and they had heard of some, and quite a lot of others they hadn't. So I think Reynolds, from what I remember, Bill Pulte had talked about him, that he was actually a mate of Mac Pate's, and I think they'd had some discussion about what went down, but I didn't get any more about that.
Yeah, that guy was also a big follower of General Edwin Walker at the time as well, a big extreme right-wing guy.
Yeah, I had read that, yeah.
Yeah, it's all very interesting, and I think, so based on what Helen Markham said she saw, because, I mean, it seems like every Tippit witness has, differing view of what they saw happen. And I haven't, some people saw two people, some people saw somebody running in the opposite direction and getting in a car. Some people saw somebody not resembling Oswald. Some people saw people that they said it was Oswald. And so catty corner, like you said, from where Markham's standing to catty corner, other side of the street, that's where Scoggins' taxi cab was parked, correct?
Yeah, he was on the corner of near the Davis girls' house, on the corner of 10th.
Now, was he
on the southern side of 10th?
Was he supposedly a real witness, or one of these? Was he in on the deal type thing?
Well, there's a number of witnesses. You got Scoggins, you got T.F. Bowley, you got Benavides. I spent a fair bit in the article about Benavides to say what the hell was going on with that, and the absolutely conflicting kind of commentary by Lavelle and Graves. Interestingly, that Lavelle and Graves happened to be the two guys walking Oswald out in the basement on Sunday. But they did a lot of interviews. Lavelle in particular interviewed a lot of these folk early on in the piece. I believe there's some evidence of other planted witnesses or prepared witnesses. Certainly, you've got witnesses then being coerced. I think that's the important thing that I can probably talk about here, is that what the Markham people have said is that when this all happened, Helen Markham told the police at the scene that it was Oswald. I can get into a little bit about what she saw. It might be best to talk about what she saw, and then I can sort of talk a little bit about that, if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
All right. So the events, and I've documented these in the article, and what we're saying, as we pointed out, so there. I'm just going to try and put these glasses on with the headphones. So Tippit's in his police car. He's coming from the west, heading in an easterly direction. Oswald is walking slowly from Marsalis and 10th in the easterly direction, in the westerly direction. Now, a short conversation did occur between Oswald and Tippit.
Mm-hmm.
You've then got
through the passenger window, right?
Through a passenger window. So
which
I
have to ask you: does that indicate to you that they knew each other? That obviously, Tippit wasn't scared or intimidated by Oswald, but by his actions, if you believe the rolling down his window and Oswald putting his hands on the windowsill and leaning in and talking to Tippit, and then him getting out without his gun drawn and all that. What are your thoughts on that? Just curious.
Look, it could be. They could have known each other. I don't know. There's certainly some researchers are out there suggesting they did. If you just touch on the Tippit got out of his car and hadn't drawn his gun, well, when Tippit was shot and his body was on the ground, his gun was out of his holster. His gun was underneath his body, and that was in a couple of different witnesses' statements. Yeah. So he had drawn his gun.
Yeah.
But I'll just go through basically what they're saying, and this is Laverne and the others saying this is what Helen is saying. It's not just their interpretation. This is what Helen is saying she has seen, and what she's told police at the scene. That at the time that Oswald is talking to Tippit, another man comes out from between the second and third house and walks up behind Oswald. And this is a guy that's about 18. He's of Italian extraction, and just stood behind Oswald. Now, the area that he'd come from is where Helen saw a second marked police car. And did that person come specifically out of that car? They don't know. They're just saying that's the area that he came from. We make an assumption that he has come from that car. He's just a young guy wearing the kind of, she described it sort of as the Fonzie type gear, from the day. He's just kind of hung around. You've then got Officer Tippit getting out of the car. He's come around to the front of the car, and then according to Helen, there was actually a brief scuffle. So is that Tippit trying to arrest him? I presume so. And then the shooting occurs, and that's Oswald shooting, according to Helen. The other man that was behind Oswald had a gun out, but she didn't think he fired. But we don't know whether he did or he didn't. But Helen's view was she didn't think he fired, but she might be wrong on that. The Italian man moved away westbound a little bit quickly, more quickly than what Oswald did. And then, according to Helen, the Italian man's gone across the vacant lot. And that then leads to the house down on the corner of the vacant lot and the little alley that runs off Patton Street, runs in the westerly direction towards the back of the church. And Oswald's gone down Patton Street. At that point, the older of the two policemen had come out from the police car, the second police car, checked on Tippit, and went back. You've then got the younger policeman, according to Helen, stayed at the car, was involved in using some sort of radio, and was writing something down. And then that car left the area. Those two police did come back to the area some time later. Now, I'm assuming with that it means when the other police officially arrived on the scene. So Helen told the police right there and then at the scene Oswald's name, that she knew Oswald, that there was a second police car in the alley, and that there was a second man, the Italian man. Now, she did apparently recognise the Italian man. She didn't know him, but she recognised him, and it was either he lived in the area or he had family in the area. But this is not Larry Crayford. No, they've never mentioned that name, and I ultimately did put them that name, but they didn't recognise it. Okay. But they've really not said any names here. They've just described what Helen said. So I don't necessarily think that they knew a lot of, like even Helen knew a lot of the actual names. I don't, or if she did, she didn't say so, but.
He was Italian looking, basically.
Italian looking, but they did then make reference to he was connected to this gang out of Little Italy, West Dallas. Now, you guys might know what that all means. It's a bit kind of vague
almost
to me.
sounds like a mafia-esque type thing. Like, you know, if you're talking about, you know, La Cosa Nostra, you know, like you think Jack Ruby's connected to the mafia, you know, these might be like some of people like that's tough guys, you know, that kind of go around, rough people up for money or break people's kneecaps or whatever they're doing.
Yeah. And I am an Italian. I'm sorry. I'm an Italian from New York, and I have quite the familiarity with the mafia and its codes and their rules, and it's very complicated. And I think that it would be a young Italian man would be would have to be really connected to have participation in this plot, and
Well, who knows? He could have been Spanish. She just said he looked Italian, you know, and she might have known him. But yeah, when you mentioned
Well,
that
it's
this guy's standing
it's
behind
interesting.
Oswald and could possibly have had a gun, you know, if Tippit and Oswald were kind of wrestling about, or Tippit's trying to arrest Oswald, and this other guy shoots him, and then he starts to go away faster than Oswald. Oswald's probably like, "Oh my God, this guy just shot this cop, and he's trying to arrest me. I need to get out of here," type of thing.
Yeah, look,
that's just
soon
what
as
shot
you've
through
got
my
all this
head when you said
information,
that.
as soon as you've got all this information, you can speculate and go, what's happening?
Right.
And I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think the family does. I don't think everything that Helen has, passed on, or there's bits there that Helen didn't know. We don't know. I think the
do you think
interesting
she was
thing about this
compromised?
Italian guy,
Do you think she was compromised in some way?
well, I'll touch on that. The
Okay.
Italian guy, if you look at the article, you'll see that FBI agent Bart Odom does a report 2 hours, probably about 2 hours, less than that, sorry, probably about an hour or so after she's been at the police station, because it's before she does the lineup with Oswald. And he writes a report, and you can see in there, it doesn't say Italian, but it just says a young man, 18, and then a description, which I've put in the article. And that was not a description of Oswald. And the Warren Commission went to town on Helen Markham, trying to get her to say, "I never told Bart Odom that." I would have thought the logical thing would be to ask Bart Odom, "Why did you write that in a report if you're listening to Helen Markham describe this guy as an 18-year-old with a dark jacket, et cetera, et cetera?" It's two different people. But going back to Helen Markham, what you've got here is, my understanding, the way I'm viewing all this now, is quite clearly it's a conspiracy to set up and intercept and capture Oswald. Now, whether they're going to arrest him and put him in jail or kill him, you've got a choice. The Helen Markham, very quickly after explaining at the scene what she was saying, what she saw, she was shut down. She was controlled. She was threatened very early in the piece. She then eventually went to give her evidence. There's a very good phone call you can hear of her with Mark Lane prior to giving testimony at the Warren Commission. But that threatening stayed for quite a while. Now, after the threatening, that wasn't the only inducement they had for Helen. They actually paid her money. And I've put that in the article. The family indicated that's what happened. She was paid thousands of dollars on several occasions. But the threats were pretty clear, because you've also got some researchers, Vince Salandria and Feldman and some others, that visited Dallas in '64. They went knocking on Helen Markham's door with Marguerite Oswald. Excuse me, let's have a drink of water.
Yeah. But do we know who was paying Helen Markham? Do we know that?
No, excuse me. The obvious inference is it's coming from either cutouts or authorities, exactly that process.
Right.
The one thing they did say was that Helen didn't really talk much after the Washington trip. She didn't say much about that trip or much after that. So it's like she realised the threats and what, they've either reiterated her compliance. The family has said that the planning for all of this interception of Oswald involved the FBI, who Helen used to refer to still as a G-man, the Dallas Authority, Dallas Police. You have Jack Ruby, you have Floyd Hamilton, and I can touch on him in a minute, and James Markham, who's Helen's son, who's the leader of that little Oak Cliff street gang.
Yes. And I wanted to actually follow up on something that Rob just brought up recently in terms of, was Helen Markham compromised in any way? And if you consider her, two oldest sons being in jail for an extended period of time, you could definitely envision a scenario where they could leverage her, right? That's not out of the realm of possibilities, in my mind at least.
Yeah, look, and I've read material on that. In fact, there's another very good Australian researcher down there that's got an article that really talks along those possible lines of the Markham involvement, as in the Markham boys' involvement. As I said early on when we started the interview, the family did believe that that gang had something else to do with the planning. Now, I've got a list of gang members that have been given to me. I've put 3 in the book. I'm not putting the others in there because I'm hoping the families might want to make contact, or others can make contact with them. But the 3 that we're talking there is Jimmy Burt, William Smith, and William Smith, the 2 William Smiths. Red was William's, one of his best friends, and Red's younger brother. So again,
is Burt a witness to the Tippit shooting too?
These 3 guys are all just up on the corner of I forget the street now.
But they were
about 100 meters.
Marcel's, and I think you mentioned in the article that one or a couple of them testified to the War Commission too.
Yeah, William Smith, because Helen Markham, I think, actually mentioned his name. That's how they came to bring him into, because she said that she spoke with him at the scene, I think, at the Tippit scene, and he supposedly went off with Jimmy Burt to have a look for the where the guy had gone or something or other down the alley. But these 3 guys, according to their statements and whatever, they're only about 100 yards away, up on the corner of 10th and just trying to think of the name of that street, just back east. Before you get to Marsalis, is it Crawford? I'm not sure.
Yes, it is Crawford. Because when I was reading the article, I was like, "Is this Crayford or Crawford?" So yes, that it was Crawford.
Yeah. So they're at the scene now. Did they have something to do with the staged event? Don't know, but it's quite unusual that they just happened to be there at that time. And I think it's also Red Smith is one of the ones that gives a statement that he observed Oswald coming from that direction and heading west on 10th. Mm-hmm. So the other thing that I would put in there, that going back to Helen Markham's information, Oswald was definitely coming from the Marsalis direction. He was not coming from the other side of Patton heading east. He was heading in a westerly direction on the footpath. So on the sidewalk, sorry.
Right, yeah, so he was essentially heading away from his rooming house.
Cover that?
Towards it.
Well, the rooming house is at Beckley. It's a different direction. But if you go back up 10th Street to Marsalis, that's the direction he was coming from. So to get from the rooming house to pick him up and drop him off, that information specifically come from Pulte and Brownlow, that they've talked to Harry Olsen, Mike Brownlow has, and other police. And that's the presentation that Mike and Bill do on their YouTube interviews. You can see where they're talking about Oswald being picked up. Now that all kind of dovetails in, I suppose, with Erlene Roberts that talks about the police car tooting the horn. Well, if you just draw a little bow from there, it suggests that the car went back around and then stopped and picked him up, because Oswald was last seen by Roberts standing at the bus stop, not heading out the front door and to the left up Beckley, south on Beckley. He's gone the other way.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I was interested to hearing your thoughts on the scuffle that happened between Oswald and Tippit, apparently. I hadn't heard that, but
Yep.
Was that because, I mean, I could have easily not, been aware of it, but why would that scuffle have happened if Oswald knew he was a patsy, if they were talking kind of, friendly, right, leaning into his car, talking, then he got out, and we all know the gun was found under Tippit. He was, I guess, a little slow on the draw. And, but you do believe Oswald did shoot Tippit, correct?
Yeah, yes, I do. Based on what I've now become aware of, what I've been told. As far as the fight, I don't have any more details on it. When I say a fight or a scuffle or whatever, there's some sort of interaction, physical interaction. And again, I've put a couple of links in the article that you can go and have a look. Ron Ryland from, I forget which TV station he was with, talks about the observations. He's on the TV an hour after, 2 hours after this event, talking about what the witness, which is Helen Markham, said she saw. And he refers to it even there about this man went up and stopped the officer. Well, how do you explain what that is all about? This is Ron Ryland hearing talk about it. So there's some things in there that give you an indication as to what that was all about. Was it Tippit just saying to Oswald, come here, and he was planning to arrest him, turn him around, handcuff him? I got no idea. But
I think
the other thing that we've got here is we talked about Helen Markham being at that catty corner.
Oh, sorry, Gavin. We got a little bit of a delay here.
Yeah, we do.
So it's causing a little bit of difficulty.
I was just going to say, we were talking about Helen Markham being at that.
Yeah.
That's okay. I was just going to say that there was, we talked earlier about Helen being at the catty corner, which is on the western side of 10th and Paddon. Well, the family indicated she was actually closer to the east of that. In fact, not that far away from where this occurred. So they're saying she wasn't at that corner that she's officially supposed to be at. She was to the east of that, in the front yard or on the side path or wherever, but somewhere a bit closer. And it's actually interesting when you look at her testimony. They walk her down the street and say, well, you left your house at 9th Street, and they ask her, which way did you walk? Like, which side of the road did you walk down? She actually says the left, which would be the east side of that street. And then he corrects and says, you mean the right? She says, right. I mean, the whole, everything you touch with this thing is very, very, very strange. But even that questioning, which side of the road did you walk down?
Yeah.
But of course,
going right, right?
Stage witness.
It's a word.
You're going
it's
right,
like
right,
a word puzzle, right? Like you could interpret it any way.
There was lots of word puzzles in that Warren Commission.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ain't that the truth? So continue, sir.
So look, that's sort of the scenario that's been I've put in the article. This is what I've gleaned from the information that I've talked with people. I think another just important thing to put in here is about the second police car. Now, this is the one that's in the driveway between the two houses at 404 and 410 that Helen said two policemen were at. One policeman came out to Tippit, went back to the car. The car then left. The car reappeared sometime later. There's two things to put in here. One is that Helen is saying that there was at the scene presented, and in her view, it was presented by the younger of the two policemen who introduced it, for whatever better term. Now, I don't have any more information about that. We know the story about the wallets. The Markham family is saying that Helen said that wallet was introduced by that second policeman. Now, does that give you a scenario that someone was going to be taken out, and they had to make sure he had some ID on him that day, because you don't know what someone's got in their back pocket. I don't know. The other important thing here, I think, is about the second police car, is that there are other corroborating witnesses besides. Helen Markham has never said any of this stuff previously. Remember, like you said, you haven't read about the fight. Well, it hasn't been out there. No one else has put anything out there about some fight or scuffle between Tippit and Oswald. This is the first time it's been explained. But the situation with the second police car is you have other witnesses. You've got the Davis girls, Virginia. She's only 16, and she very clearly described the shooting, looked out to see Oswald running down the side of the house, ejecting shells or whatever. And then the phone call was made, and very quickly she said she runs outside. And I think it was Bellin, I'm not sure, and said, "What did you see then?" And she talked about the police were already there. Now, does he explore any line of inquiry about the police were already there? No. He starts talking about something completely different. But the story there about the police car, besides Virginia Davis, is you have Sam Ginyard told this early on in the piece to Mike Brownlow in the 70s. Sam was working at Ted Calloway, the African-American. But the number one is a person that talked about the second police car is Doris Halland. And Doris Halland is at the scene, and I've spoken to Lad Halland, and there's another researcher that did some articles about the second police car, and I've put that in the article to indicate that that information in that article by that researcher is wrong, and that Doris Halland was present. She not only saw the second police car drive through the driveway, she saw Oswald, that's what her words were, and she talked about a man going across the vacant lot. So we have got confirmation from a number of sources. Just on that, by the way, when the Hallands spoke to the other researcher, they explained to the other researcher about the fact that Doris was there and had seen the second police car and Oswald running down the street. That other researcher has failed to put that in his paper, and that's pretty concerning. But I've printed in that article precisely the words that Lad's sister told Lad, and that's what she told the other researcher. And it's quite clear we've got a number of sources talking about this second police car. That second police car, the police officers didn't respond to Oswald. The shooting didn't take off and chase. They came out and then drove off in the car. So that certainly, when you add that and try and provide a logical or reasonable explanation for that, there is none, other than it's a conspiracy, it's a setup, and that's the entrapment that was happening to capture Oswald. If this had gone the way it might have been planned, let's say Oswald resisted and Officer Tippit shot him in self-defence, all of this information may have come out. That second police car may have been there to provide some inverted commas corroboration of Oswald sort of scuffling with Tippit and Tippit shooting him in self-defence. I don't know. That's the speculation bit. We might have heard about this arrest charge on Oswald in relation to theft and break and enter. And we may have heard about the stage scene that occurred at 10th and Marsalis. The stage scene, the scenario there, the family confirmed, that was to have some justification for Officer Tippit to be in the area where he was. He's coming from the east, heading in a westerly direction towards Marsalis, and Oswald is coming from Marsalis. I could probably touch on here, we mentioned before we went on air, I've prepared a bit of information that is the scenario as I see it sort of unfolding, and I've been able to research some of the Dallas Police radio transcripts and logs, and I can try and put that in a bit of context if you want.
Sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, they're very interesting, those police logs.
I'll just flick over to this document.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of read this out, and it sort of flows, I think, reasonably well. But this is a brief examination of some of the police radio traffic around the time of the Tippit shooting. There are numerous examples of suspicious activity identified by researchers over the years. They have suggested there has been alteration, deletion, and addition of calls into the record. I agree with this. Let's have a look at some of the radio calls in light of the Markham family revelations. So at 12:30, President Kennedy shot in Dealey Plaza. The radio dispatcher's communications centre alerts all police cars to Elm and Houston. Police officers converge on the area. Then with all the chaos and frantic communication going on, just 15 minutes after the Kennedy shooting at 12:45, Dallas Police radio dispatcher Murray Jackson, former partner of Officer Tippit, ordered Officer Tippit and Nelson, another former partner of Tippit, into the Central Oak Cliff area, radio call sign 78, away from their normal patrol district. Jackson said he did this because he was aware he was draining the surrounding area of police resources. This sounds logical, except the same approach of relocating other officers is not taken by other experienced radio dispatchers. Jackson had been working there for 3 days at this stage in the radio room. And pretty well no other officers, north, south, east or west of Dealey Plaza, are given similar orders to the one given to Tippit and Nelson. So why was Tippit and Nelson singled out with this unique order? So what did Officer Nelson do? Well, according to the transcript, he disobeyed that order and drove to Elm Street anyway and confirmed his location on the police radio. Police, FBI submitted what was known as the Sawyer radio transcript to the Warren Commission in early '64. The Jackson 1245 radio transcript, the Jackson 1245 order to Officer Tippit and Nelson to go to Central Oak Cliff was not included in the transcript. What an amazing omission. The order that is supposed to lead Officer Tippit to be in Oak Cliff out of his normal patrol district where he encountered Oswald is missing from the transcript. This led to suspicion that there never was such an order by Jackson, and the tapes have been altered, and the 1245 order by Jackson was added in later. Suspicion. The FBI took possession of the police radio dicta belt and tapes a few hours after the assassination and returned them several days later, so an alteration was possible. The Dallas police were the lead agency in the Kennedy and Tippit shooting. They laid charges against Oswald, gathered evidence, and prepared an initial brief evidence for court, and should have maintained control of those tapes. Why was the FBI taking control of the tapes off the Dallas police when we've got a court case preparation underway? Then at 12:54, 9 minutes after the last call to Tippit, Jackson called Tippit again, checked his location in Oak Cliff, and said, "You will be at large for any emergency that comes in." Every time I read that, I just shake my head. This is an amazing comment by Jackson. It makes no operational sense or any sense at all. It's like saying, be a good policeman, stay alert and do your job. No other police get a similar message. Unlike the 12.
And can I interrupt you there, sir? What do you have? What are your thoughts on the reports on Tippit making the phone call from the record store, from him pulling over random cars or a car, and then speeding off and being in a big rush and calling someone and not getting an answer? Those type of consensus beliefs about what happened before the Tippit slaying.
Yeah, look, I think anybody that looks at all that, the speed he was travelling at some occasions, then when he does the interception at 10th Street, he's driving very slow. So to me, that's someone who was frantic, searching for someone, and things hadn't gone according to plan, or there was a breakdown in communication, as you can have happen when you're doing surveillance or planned interceptions. So I don't really know. That's just somebody that's frantic. It's not a case of someone on a routine, casual, nothing happening patrol. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it seemed to me like somebody looking for somebody. Because Gavin, I know you've seen the photos of the Tippit murder scene, right? And there's several shots of Tippit's car, and there's one from the sidewalk kind of shooting into Tippit's car from like the right rear door. And I swear to me, it really looks like a portrait or drawing of a person, like on the dash, like on a clipboard mounted on the dash. I don't know if it's possibly could have been a picture of Oswald or a composite sketch of their suspect, in the Kennedy murder. They're very vague, suspect description that they had immediately after that from Brendan. They're looking for a guy with, 165, 150, 160 pounds, brown hair, white guy type of thing. And maybe that's why that Tippit ultimately...
Look, I've seen the photo you're talking about, and it does appear to be some sort of an image of a person. According to
very odd.
Lavelle and I think Barnes, maybe, they said they didn't really investigate that. There was nothing to see there. So there's really no way to explain what that was all about.
A common excuse in the case. Nothing to see here.
If it was supposed to be a picture of Oswald relevant to the assassination of Kennedy, well, there's no way in the world that could be related to that, because they wouldn't have had time to, A, they didn't even know it was Oswald at that stage, and B, they wouldn't have had time to print it out and give it to Tippit. He's already out and about. So it looks suspicious. What it was about, don't know.
Yeah.
If I can continue on here, it sort of gets interesting. So unlike the 12:45 p.m. order given by Jackson, this comment makes its way into the Sawyer Warren Commission radio transcript. The comment created even more suspicion the tapes had been altered, and that the "be at large" for any emergency message was also added to the tape. So was this an authentic message? If it was it to signal to Tippit about the plan to intercept Oswald, or were the 12:45 and 12:54 messages edited onto the tape later to make it look like Tippit was sent to the area on high alert for an emergency in the area? I think the latter. In the Sawyer Commission, the transcript stated, "This is the last radio transmission between Tippit and the radio dispatcher. This statement is wrong, as we will see that Jackson called Tippit once more at 1:03, and Tippit calls the dispatcher twice at 1:08. So why did the Dallas police or FBI Sawyer submission hide the fact there was more communication or attempts between Jackson and Tippit? At 1:03, 9 minutes after that earlier call about the be at large, Jackson called Tippit again and asked his location. He gets no reply. Why has Jackson called Tippit again? He has already established he was in Oak Cliff. If that 12:54 call was authentic, what is he going to advise Tippit of or task him to do? Jackson, in a 1967 TV interview with Eddie Barker, it's on YouTube, said he called Tippit at this time because he was trying to keep track of Tippit in his mind. Okay? On what basis does he need to know that and other officers don't get the same type of calls? He's calling Tippit apparently about that, but no one else. The call is suspicious. Is it possible there was actually some communication between the two officers, but it's been deleted? Jackson is not called to give evidence to the Warren Commission. At 1:08, Tippit called the dispatcher twice. He gets no reply. Why has Tippit called the dispatcher about 5 minutes after Jackson called him? What is he reporting or requesting? The Dallas police / FBI submitted their second police radio transcript to the Warren Commission in early 1964. It was called Warren Commission 705. The Jackson 1:03 p.m. call and both the Tippit 1:08 p.m. calls are included in Warren Commission 705. So why had the earlier Sawyer submission to the Warren Commission say there was no more transmission after the 12:54 call by Jackson? In mid-1964, the Dallas Police FBI submitted their third police radio transcript to the Warren Commission. It was called CE 1974. In this third transcript, the Jackson 1:03 p.m. call is included, but the two 1:08 Tippit calls are no longer attributed to Tippit, call sign 78. They are now attributed to call sign 58 and then call sign 488. And they are unable to identify who these officers are. Sergeant Jim Bowles was in charge of the Dallas Police Communications Room and was integral in the analysis of the tapes and preparation of transcripts and the liaison with the FBI. He is on record that the WC 705 calls at 1:08 p.m. are 78. And he knew it was Tippit because he stated he knew Tippit. He recognised his voice, his tone, the inflection of the 4 syllables, 78. There's more. Vincent Bugliosi stated that on, of all people, stated that on March 25, 2004, Jim Bowles played the police radio tape he had with him over the phone to Bugliosi. Bugliosi confirmed he heard 78. So we need to ask, why has WC 705 transcript that stated there are 2 1:08 p.m. 78 calls by Tippit changed 2 months later in the CE 1974 transcript to 58 and 488. Both transcripts are from the original tape and dicta belt recordings and should be the same. This is very suspicious. There appears to be an attempt to remove the fact that Tippit called the radio dispatcher twice at 1:08 p.m. as confirmed by Bowles and Bugliosi. Now back to Jackson and his 67 TV interview. This part is very revealing. It's about a street disturbance and another call by Jackson to Tippit that is not in the transcripts. So this is what Jackson said, and this may relate to the stage scene disturbance at 10th and Marsalis. Eddie Barker says, when did you realise he was dead? I'll just read out what Murray Jackson says, and then I'll give you an explanation of what I think is going on. Murray Jackson says, we had received a call from a citizen. They called us. By the way, you can see this on YouTube. That interview's still there. We received a call from the citizen. They called us in on the telephone, and the call sheet came to me. There was a disturbance in the street in the 400 block of East 10th. And I had called, and I said 78, and he didn't answer. And almost immediately to this, the citizen came in on the police radio and said, send me some help. There's been an officer shot out here. And knowing that JD was the only one that should have been in the Oak Cliff area, my reaction was to call 78, and of course JD didn't answer. So we asked the citizen to look at the number of the side of the car. This was the equipment number that determined which patrol car was to be on each assigned district. And they said it was number 10. And since I'd worked with JD in that particular car, well, I determined to myself, with him not answering, and the equipment number, this was Officer Tippit. So there's a few things to unpack here, things that don't make sense. Jackson said in this interview that he called Tippit to ask him where his location was and got no reply. This would have been the 1:03 p.m. call. Now, Jackson said that he called Tippit again, and the reason he called him was about a disturbance phoned in by a citizen. He said he had the call sheet about the disturbance in front of him. The call sheet is completed by the police emergency call phone operator who sits in the radio room next to the dispatchers. So the normal procedure in this process, Jackson would have ordered Tippit to investigate the disturbance and report back. Jackson said Tippit didn't answer the call when he tried to raise him. This call by Jackson is not recorded in any of the 3 radio transcripts submitted to the Warren Commission. Why? Its submission is suspicious. Jackson stated the call from the public was about a disturbance. It's quite reasonable to conclude that a member of the public who hears gunshots in the street and calls the police emergency number would call it as, I heard gunshots. The police phone operator would write down gunshots on the call sheet. So the question here is this citizen call actually about a disturbance in Oak Cliff and was not actually about the gunshots at the Tippit scene? After Bowley called in the Tippit shooting on Tippit's police radio, Jackson called call sign 78 3 times before Bowley confirmed it was police car number 10. How did Jackson know immediately it was Tippit who had been shot? Jackson stated he called 78 because he knew JD was the only police officer who would have been in Oak Cliff. This does not make sense, as he has dispatched Nelson to Oak Cliff earlier, and in his mind must have assumed he was there. And Officer Menzel, who was the actual officer assigned to the Oak Cliff District 78, was in the area. Did Jackson call Tippit because he had already tasked him to investigate a disturbance and knew exactly where he was on 10th, but this communication has been removed from the tapes? Jackson distinctly recalled that he asked the citizen to look at the number of the side of the police car. He said that this would be the equipment number that determined which patrol car was in each district. The citizen apparently replied number 10. The problem here is that there is no record of Jackson asking that question of the citizen. None of the transcripts or the audio tapes, and they're on YouTube, or some of them, record Jackson's request to the citizen to check out the car for a number. Murray Jackson's own words call into question the authenticity of the tapes. Alterations, additions and deletions have occurred, in my opinion. There are several critical conversations missing, and the question is why. Okay, so let's try and put all this into some sort of context and explain what's possibly going on here, or likely going on here. The Markham family information reflects conspiracy and cover-up by the police. It is suggested the police intercepted Oswald in a planned clandestine operation. It was not a coincidence that Tippit, outside of his normal district, stopped Oswald on 10th Street. If we overlay the Markham information claims onto this record of radio communications and the numerous suspicious goings-on just discussed, we can consider it a very likely scenario. The Markham claims, we've already talked about the positioning of the planted witness, the arrest and the stage scene. So the trap set for Oswald at 10th Street involving Dallas police and others could go something like this. Remember that some communication have been deleted or changed from the transcripts. The 12:54 call by Jackson to Tippit, if it was authentic, was a signal that the planned operation Oswald was on track and Oswald was en route to Oak Cliff. Oswald then leaves his boarding house a few minutes after 1. He is driven to 10th and Marsalis and starts walking west on 10th. We know he can't walk the distance from his rooming house to 10th Street and be there in time to be intercepted by Tippit at about 1:16, which is the official version according to the Warren Commission. Excuse me. At 1:03, Jackson actually called Tippit and directed him to investigate a disturbance at 10th and Marsalis. The citizen called the police about a disturbance either happened or a prepared call sheet was introduced into the dispatcher's desk and communicated to Tippit. Jackson may have also provided Tippit with a description of the man seen leaving the area of the disturbance, walking west on 10th. This disturbance is the stage fight scene by orchestrated at 10th and Marsalis. At 1:08 p.m, Tippit called dispatch twice and advised he was about to stop and interview a suspect who matched the description of the man from the disturbance, and he requested police backup. This brings the second police car, the one in the driveway, into the scene. Tippit attempted to arrest Oswald. Oswald shoots Tippit and flees. The Oswald arrest plan has failed and the cover-up begins. T.F. Bowley arrives on the scene and calls the shooting in on the police radio. He looked at his watch and said in his affidavit it was 1:10. Yet the official time in the Warren Commission for Bowley call is 8 minutes later at 1:18. There are numerous people who indicated the shooting was around 1:06 to 1:08. That's Markham, Higgins, Bowley, and believe it or not, Ainsworth. The ambulance based at Jefferson Street on 10th quickly rushed to the Tippit scene, picked up Tippit and transferred him to the Methodist Hospital, which is nearby. From the time of the shooting to the time the ambulance responded to the scene, placed Tippit in the ambulance, rushed him to the Methodist Hospital, about 6 or 7 minutes. If we examine medical and police records related to Officer Tippit's death, we find he is recorded dead at Methodist Hospital at 1:15. So we've got the Dallas County, Texas authorised permit for autopsy issued by Earl Rose, and it's got place of death, Methodist Hospital, time of death, 1:15. The certificate of death dated 29th of November, time of death, 1:15. The police report by Officers Davenport and Barden stated that Dr. Richard Lequari pronounced Tippit dead 1:15 at Methodist Hospital. So working backwards from 1:15, the shooting is somewhere around 1:07, 1:08, somewhere. Remember, all these clocks aren't synchronised. Now, the official time for the shooting as per the Warren Commission, sorry, did I say Warren Commission? I meant to say the Warren Commission is 1:16. So the tapes have to be altered to cover up the conversations, activity and times which reflect a 1:08 shooting, as Oswald can't get to 10th on foot by that time. He didn't walk to 10th, but they can't have him getting a lift by others. That equals a conspiracy. So the official story is Oswald walked, and they have to drop the shooting time out to about 1:16. Bowley called it in probably about 1:10, but they dropped that back to 1:18. I must also remove any reference on the communications about the disturbance at 10th and Marsalis called in by the citizen, the planned investigation of the disturbance by Tippit, the intended interception of Tippit of a suspect walking on the sidewalk, and the second police car backup who corroborated Tippit's version of events. The Markham revelations reflect a well-planned interception of Oswald with staged events and planted witness. Given these revelations, the scenario I've just outlined is very likely. It is a realistic interpretation of what communications would have looked like if things had gone down as planned and Tippit arrested or shot Oswald, and there would have been what would appear as an authentic police radio record of events as part of the cover-up. When Oswald shot Tippit, the cover-up had to make everything disappear and have it all appear as a coincidental interception of Oswald by Tippit about 8 minutes later than actually occurred. In my opinion, there are significant problems with the radio calls, timings and events by the Warren Commission. The record is not credible and simply doesn't add up. Given the Markham revelations and what we know of the radio calls, I've filled in some gaps with a likely script for what went down in the failed plan to arrest Oswald the Patsy and the subsequent cover-up that occurred by police and authorities.
Very interesting stuff for sure. I always thought not only the conflicting statements of the witnesses, but the conflicting times of Tippit's supposed murder. Like you said, from anywhere from 106 as early as that to, as late as 118. I didn't know Hugh Ainsworth supported the 106 to 108 claim. That's interesting to know. Because
that was an interview that he had with Shirley Martin. So again, coming from pretty credible research.
Yeah. Oswald definitely wouldn't have had time to walk there by then.
No.
So, very interesting,
Yep. I actually did my own personal experiment. Not that this is completely relevant, but I walked at a very high pace on a treadmill, and I completed a mile in about 13 minutes. And that was like me, really 4 or 5 miles per hour. There was no way Oswald could have got there within
on foot
a few minutes. So I have no doubt that the timeline on foot while he was observed waiting at a bus station, it doesn't match up. So.
Did Markham did Markham ever say or mention, because Oswald would have had to walk past her, right, on 10th Street. Did she ever mention seeing him and recognizing him before the Tippit encounter?
Well, they're on opposite side of the roads, but Oswald's not walking past her. Oswald's coming from Marsalis, so he's heading in a westerly direction. And Helen Markham, the official version was that she was supposed to be on the corner of east, north, I think it is, 10th and Paddon. She's actually, according to the family, was actually closer east of there, up 10th Street. So closer to, if she's at that catty corner, she's about 100 foot away from the Tippit car. When you look at her very early statements, I think, I'd have to check the record, I think she's talking to Mark Lane. I think she talked about being 50 foot away. So, again, there's certainly a lot of reports of Oswald walking from the west in that direction.
Yeah, and also putting her hands over her eyes as well, right? As Oswald or whoever the shooter of Tippit was passed her, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's what she said in her testimony. I don't think I actually got any more information about all of that particular part of things. I mean, the other thing that's interesting with Markham is that Jack Ruby was at her place at the Eat Well Cafe at about 7:30 that night, looking for her. Why? He's been involved, according to the family, with this whole setup. So that's on record. Bill Pulte established that from talking to waitresses at the Eat Well. You've also got, sorry, I've lost track. There was something else you'd said earlier there, Rob, I was going to mention, but it'll come back to me.
Yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Oh, sorry, that was the other thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was the other thing. It was George Senator, believe it or not, on the morning that Ruby shoots, Oswald George Senator sitting in the Eat Well cafe having a cup of coffee, just biding his time. So it's a very popular little part of town. I've put in the article, Helen Markham and her new husband, Markham was her married name from earlier, they used to go to the Carousel Club. So there's a connection there with Ruby, there's no doubt about that. And Ruby is at the Eat Well about 7:30 on Friday night looking for her. She's not there, so he leaves.
Oh. Yes, I was going to say it's not out of the realm of possibility, if Jack Ruby was, acting as a tough guy, and involved in some of the seedier side of things, like we all believe that he was, as far as, maybe providing drugs or women to people on the side, that, he could have even possibly been involved with running these wayward youths, to either sell drugs for them or get weapons or money or anything like that. As part of this gang, and they could have possibly either been directly reporting to Ruby or maybe indirectly through some other cutout as well. It's not out of the realm of possibility there either, because I think, didn't Jack Ruby live fairly close to 10th and Patton? Like a couple blocks past that?
Yeah, I can't. I've seen the apartment block, but it's not that far away. I think it's south, sort of east from there. I think from memory. It's interestingly that the Markham brothers were living near on Lancaster in an apartment while Helen was at 9th Street, and that apartment block is not very far from Ruby's at all. And you've got a number of other people in that very location, of course. You've got Kathy Kay's apartment not far away. I think William Scoggins' house is not far away. It's a very small little area in a lot of ways, and back in the day, everyone knew everybody. I certainly believe that Ruby's hand is here. There was enough suspicion before the Markham revelation, as far as I'm concerned, but this sort of just confirms it as far as I can see.
Definitely. Well, Gavin, I think you did a great job of painting this picture for us and revealing this new information from the Markham family. And I would direct everyone out there to go pick up Garrison the Journal, Volume 15, where you can read the entire thing. Because, like I said, we just scratched the surface here today. There's a lot of information there to be had and to be sorted through. So please check that out. Joe, you have any final comments for Gavin?
I just want to commend you on a very thorough article. It was very detailed, very specific, and a very interesting read, and kind of made me reevaluate some of the consensus in the community regarding Tippit and the situation regarding that whole thing. But I couldn't be happier to have you on with us. And I suggest everyone go to Garrison online, buy the internet version like I did, and read it and decide for yourself.
Yeah, look, thanks for that, and I'll be more than happy to come back and do another round. I've actually received some more information on a number of different things, and I've pulled a lot of that together, and I'll be able to share that soon. So I'll be happy to come back on your show and release that if you wanted to. Just on one of the things there you mentioned there. The thing with the family that's spoken up, I was very careful, being former, law enforcement officer, in trying to make sure when you're talking to someone, you get clarity about where this is coming from, the source, all of that. Now, that's a little bit difficult when you're talking about the length of period in time that we've got, and family members are talking about things, some not talking at all, but some internally talking about different things. certainly conversations that, Laverne, for example, had with Helen, well, she's having conversations with her husband, who she's married to for 48 years, William, who was in the gang. So it's kind of like, I was very careful to say, what did Helen see? What did Helen say? So it was always couched in that term. So we were getting clarity as best they could recall. The other thing I'd just point out, again, I wanted to thank the family for speaking up. They're being paid nothing for this information. They're not being paid by anybody to come forward. They're not spinning any narrative. They're just providing an explanation that we hadn't heard of before about what the hell went on around this time. So they're not spinning a narrative. And certainly the journal, the Garrison Journal, sure, it's a publication that you have to go online and access. I'm certainly not being paid anything for it. It's a free article. I'm just doing this as a researcher. So there's no of the normal kind of, silly incentives that some people say, people are doing things for various reasons. I think they've just decided it's time, and there's more to the story. Helen was controlled. She was threatened. She was ultimately then paid, and she maintained that story right the way through.
Yeah. And I have one last question for you, Gavin, and it relates to Helen Markham, of course. And obviously her kids were in trouble, so she could be leveraged in a couple different ways. But would people trust her to maintain this story, right? This narrative that would implicate, or, Oswald or anyone else, whoever shot Tippit. And would she be trustable enough? Because a wise man, a teacher of mine, once told me the likelihood of an intelligence operation being blown is inversely proportional to the number of people involved in it. So would Helen Markham be trustworthy enough to be involved in an operation, or was she just not aware? And that is my fault.
I think my reading of that is that she was arranged to witness an arrest. That is what the family is saying. She said that's what she thought was supposed to happen. And I put that in the article. She did not expect to see a shooting and did not expect to see Oswald shoot Tippit. So in that scenario, her being involved, being told just be there, there'll be some sort of a police involvement with a citizen, blah, blah, blah. Well, she did say she knew it was going to be Oswald. And that's all she's being paid to do. I can see that happening. And you've got to use, if you're going to set up that environment, that location, you want operational security, you have to have a plausible reason for her to be there. Well, she's coming on her way down to the bus stop. So that's the story that they've used all that scenario to make this happen. So as far as trustworthiness of Helen Markham, I've got no idea. But I could see them using locals, and that's when we get to Benavides, Scoggins, the Davis girls. You talk about the Davis girls. Ruby's telephone number, Crayford, had that in his diary in Ruby's notebooks, that telephone number was the Davis girl's house. So what's Eleanor, I think, was the Jewish girl. What's that telephone number doing in Ruby's book as transcribed by Crayford? And when Crayford was asked, some of the Warren Commission did feel something strange was going on, because they said, isn't it a bit odd to have this odd inquiry about a job application appearing in his list of contact numbers? So every time you touch anything, it just, get more questions, and a lot of credibility is missing from a lot of this information.
Exactly, and that's why we're on episode number 271 and still counting, Gavin. So we wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. You killed it. Great episode, and thank you so much again for appearing here and sharing your information with our listeners. I think they're going to get a lot out of this, and like I said, once again, the link will be in the description where you can check out the full article. And thank you again, Gavin. And we'd love to have you back on soon when they get some more information. And we look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
Thank you, Gavin.
Thanks, guys. I'd love to come back.
Have a great rest of your day in sunny Australia.
Yes, back to the future, sir.
Rainy at the moment.
Yeah.
Cheers, boys.
All right, cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.